Welcome to the Super Subs with
Andrew.
and Harry, where we talk about anything and everything related to football. This week, we're going to be talking about and introing the World Cup. So, what is the World Cup, especially for newer fans that are new to football and have not seen the World Cup or have seen the World Cup with other friends and family before in front of a television and just wandered into a bar or an area where they're showing a World Cup game. We're going to talk about how the World Cup started, what the history of the World Cup was, our anecdotes about the World Cup, and really how a host gets selected and who's really favored for a World Cup. We're actually going to preview who we think is going to win the World Cup, but that's actually going to be the next episode. So we're going to intro everyone to what the World Cup is for this week. So, Andrew, before we get started, how's your weekend been? What have you been up to? Let me hear about what you've been up to and what you're drinking or what you're sipping on for this episode.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. Currently drinking on coffee. Seems to be a staple in my life
Yeah.
these days, most days. This weekend's been good. For those listening out there, my full-time job right now is graduate school, so full-on studying and papers and everything like that. So not too exciting. How about yourself, Harry?
I just came back from an event that was hosted by a company called Yelp. So they put on a few different events. They partner with local restaurants, and I was lucky enough to experience a restaurant where they served a few dishes from brunch, and they served some delicious cocktails and different drinks. So got back from there, out in San Francisco. So there are a plethora of restaurants that are ready to taste and drink from. But I'm not drinking anything too fancy right now. I've got my water. I have a local soccer league that I participated in, or a football league, and I got that sticker from them, but just water for now. So thankfully not soaking up the alcohol right now. But you excited for the World Cup? How do you feel about the World Cup coming up in, I think, 2 weeks at this point, right, Andrew? How are things shaping up?
Oh, so excited. I definitely felt the absence of it this summer. I really would have loved to have it during the summer, but we'll get into it later about why the World Cup is in the winter for the first time ever. Can't wait. Super excited to see U.S. men battle it out against our over-the-sea rivals, England. And yeah, excited to see how it unfolds. We'll get into injuries later, predictions, but I really cannot wait for it to unfold. How about for you?
Oh, yeah. The World Cup is always exciting. Obviously, this year is a little bit controversial with the choice of the nation that we're going to. A lot of people are protesting. Rightly so, I would say. Andrew and I won't get too much into it, but we will talk about how a host is chosen for this episode. I would personally have loved to see it go to a nation like Australia. I know they were in the same bid as well for 2022. A lot of nations haven't had the World Cup hosted in their nation yet, and I'd love to see the World Cup come visit, and it always brings about a little bit of an economic boom, I would say, to the nation, which is why Qatar wanted it so badly, and there's a process to go through that we'll go over today. But nevertheless, I'm excited for the World Cup. A lot of nations are showing up. A lot of players are waiting with bated breath, not to get injured and making sure they're in tip-top shape for the World Cup. And it's a very big thing in terms of national pride, but as well as bragging rights, and obviously comes only every 4 years. So it's something that you want to perform the best that you can as a player for your national team and for your country. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about our memories with the World Cup, Andrew. So I'd love to hear about your memories, and I can talk about mine. So, Andrew, what are your memories about World Cup events that you've been through, whether it's a goal that's been scored or a team that the U.S. has played or another country has played? What are some memorable World Cup events that you can remember that make you passionate about watching the World Cup itself?
When I think about the World Cup, I think a lot about those iconic goals. I think for me, one that comes to mind is the Donovan goal in 2020 in the group stages versus Algeria at the death to send the U.S. through to the knockout stages. I remember screaming at the top of my lungs, jumping up and down, running around my parents' house. It was absolute madness. I think as a US fan, you always kind of wait with bated breath as far as, okay, are we going to actually do anything this year? How are we looking? Can we hang with the big dogs? So that was a really big moment. I felt like getting out of the group stages, and definitely really stiff competition from that point onwards. Second most memorable thing, I think, had to be the Mario Götze winner against Argentina to win the 2014 World Cup. I remember it really well. I remember it specifically because he had been playing for Dortmund. I started following Dortmund in that kind of past year. And for him to score was just absolutely fantastic. And it sent, the country into raptures. I know my partner was overseas in Germany when they won, and it was absolute bedlam. And just, one of the coolest experiences to see, a country win on such a spectacular goal. And, it's a shame that as the Wonder Kid, he didn't do quite as hot afterwards. He had spells at, Bayern, back at Dortmund, and then picked it up again PSV, and now is playing for Frankfurt. So really wishing the best for him. He's a really fun player to watch. But yeah, Harry, anything stand out for you as far as World Cup memories and things that really come to your mind?
Yeah, I would say the World Cup is a great event to get into football or soccer because of all the nations coming together. You don't even need to know that much about the players that are going, the teams that are in the different leagues of the players that are going to the World Cup, but all you need to have is a little bit of pride of the nation that you're supporting or the nations that you're supporting, whether it's an adopted nation or your own nation. I know for myself, I'm of Chinese ethnicity, and China hasn't been to the World Cup in a long time. I'm okay with that. I support many other nations. So the first nation or the first World Cup rather, that I remember is the 2006 World Cup. I believe that was in Germany, and that was hosted in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great World Cup. But the one that I really remember, and the one that really sparks a lot of joyous, I would say, memories for me as a fan growing up watching football, is the 2010 World Cup, with Spain winning the World Cup overall and Iniesta scoring a goal. So for those newer soccer fans or newer football fans, there's a lot of nations that participate in the World Cup. 32 nowadays. It used to be 16 back in the days historically, but 32 teams play for the World Cup, and it's over about a 2-month period that teams play to be crowned as the champion of the World Cup among all the nations that qualify. And Spain was one of those nations in 2010, and they had a really, really, really good team. And there was this midfielder called Iniesta. He was just magic with the ball at his feet, very much like Lionel Messi, who still plays for Argentina, who's gonna star for Argentina for this 2022 Qatar World Cup. It may well be his last World Cup, which a lot of people are looking forward to and rooting for Argentina this World Cup. But 2010, I remember really loving the Spanish team, loving the midfield, the forwards, the defenders, as well as the goalkeeper, Iker Casillas. And he was just a phenomenon of stopping shots and really good in front of goal. So I love the Spanish team. And in 2014, I remember having really vivid memories as well. I was cooking in my kitchen, and I was at home and watching the World Cup, and I remember putting on the Brazil game. Actually, I remember Brazil were the hosts of the 2014 World Cup, if I'm not mistaken, and they were playing against Germany. So the host nation, for those that don't know, always qualifies for the World Cup, and Brazil is one of the strongest nations that has the most football skill, and they were playing Germany, and Germany actually beat Brazil 7-1, and that is a score that we call in football as a basketball score or an NFL score, because you usually don't see score lines of that margin. You usually see a 1-1, 2-1, 3-1, but 7-1 is insane. And I remember Germany were just pretty much playing around with Brazil at the end of the game, and the Brazil fans were heartbroken. So those two events, I would say, stand out to me in terms of the World Cup. And there's many more events that I'm sure Andrew and I can talk about. But Andrew, let's talk a little bit about the history of the World Cup. So let's go into how the World Cup was founded, and let's go on from who played in the World Cup, what countries were successful in the World Cup. So the World Cup was first founded in 1930. So this was a competition that was first actually part of the Olympic Games, but FIFA actually took under its wing when it became an organization known around the world as a football association, and they organized something called the World Cup in place of a competition in the Olympics. So the Olympics first had a football, pretty much amateur competition that a lot of nations would participate in, but FIFA was founded as an association that was aside from the Olympics that would organize world football and that would organize competitions like the World Cup. So it was founded in 1930. Scotland and England, actually, if you rewind a little bit, played the first ever international football match. So outside of the World Cup, outside of anything, they played the first international football match in 1872. But the Olympics held the first official international competition. So not a friendly competition, but an official competitive competition in 1908. And then Great Britain, Belgium, and Uruguay were the first three countries that actually won the international competition held by the Olympics through 1928. So this was a competition dating far back before 1930, but the first official World Cup took place in Uruguay in 1930, and Uruguay actually won that World Cup, I believe. So, Andrew, let's talk a little bit about the first few World Cup matches as well as the World Cups leading up to the 1950s. So let's talk a little bit about that. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the first few World Cup matches as well as the first World Cup?
Sure. Yeah, as you stated, first World Cup was held in Uruguay in 1930. And like you said, they actually won that World Cup, which is really cool. Host nation. It's always really special when a host nation wins the World Cup in their country, when they're hosting the World Cup. So the first two World Cup matches were played on July 13th of 1930 and were actually won by France and the USA, respectively. Go America.
Yeah, we never win.
So
it's crazy. We're written history. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. We've never won a World Cup. The women's team have. They're absolutely amazing. Really, really strong performances. But 1942 and 1946 were skipped because of World War II. And interestingly enough, the British, their first participation in the World Cup was not until 1950. So post World War II, they got involved, and we'll talk about them later, but definitely one of the strongest international men's teams. A lot of fantastic players. Have been underperforming a bit this year, but did make it to the Euro Cup, the finals, not too long ago. So, yeah, let's dive into the best historical teams in the World Cup. So, Harry, what comes to mind when you think of the World Cup juggernauts, the powerhouses, the ones that have the most historic players, biggest cup titles, things like that?
Yeah. So you have to mention Brazil. When it comes to World Cups, Brazil is just an absolute machine when it comes to World Cups. And there's this phrase called Jogo Bonito, which is pretty much translates to beautiful football. And it's this style of football or soccer that was played by Brazilian footballers around the world. And they have this flair or passion or excitement. They do all kinds of tricks and all kinds of skills with football moves and in matches. Nowadays, I would say for modern football, for those that are getting to the game or getting introduced to the World Cup or soccer or football nowadays, a lot of teams play very direct, very tactical football. So they play very rigid formations. They play with the ball from player to player. There's not as much flair going on. But I would say in the 1990s to 2000s, etc., you'll hear of players like Ronaldinho, pretty much Ronaldo 9 from Brazil, and all of these Brazilian players that had so much flair, that would do all these tricks at their feet, flick the ball over an opposing player. They would have all these tricks with them. And Brazil, I would say, is the one nation that most epitomizes tricks and skills and the passion with football. And fun fact, they've played in every World Cup ever. We're actually going to get to the topic of how a nation qualifies for the World Cup, but you have to qualify. It's not like as a nation, if you're automatically good historically, you're always going to be part of the World Cup. You always have to qualify in an individual tournament based on the region of the world that you're from. And Brazil has always qualified for every single World Cup since it was founded. So Brazil's always in the conversation. Germany and Italy are always in those conversations. Germany has won the World Cup back a few years ago. Italy has won the World Cup back in 2006, I believe, Andrew. And
Yeah.
those three countries, I would say, are always juggernauts, powerhouses. Italy, ironically, is actually not in this World Cup. So if you're watching as a fan, and if you have Italian origins or heritage or ethnic background, I'm sorry, you're just not going to see Italy in this World Cup tournament, but they will absolutely qualify for probably the next World Cup or the one after that. It was just a shame, very unlucky that they didn't qualify for this one. But you get in a World Cup based on merit. That's just end of line, bottom, end of discussion. You have to qualify for the World Cup. Andrew, what are some countries that you feel like you are watching out for, or you feel like you've seen as the best teams historically in the World Cup that our viewers and listeners getting into soccer or football in the World Cup should watch out for?
It's a good question. One thing that definitely comes to mind is Argentina. You've got to always keep Argentina in the conversation. It's hard to mention, Argentina without also mentioning Lionel Messi. For those that are just getting into the game, you've probably heard the name. He is undisputedly one of the best players to ever play the game. There's always the ongoing debate between who's better right now, Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi. It's a divisive camp. We can share our opinions on that later, but Argentina has to be in the conversation. They have a really strong team coming into this year, a lot of really talented players, especially playing in Europe. And they've got the infamous Diego Maradona. And, enough said. He's absolute legend and definitely dearly missed after his passing. In the conversation, you have to talk about France as well. They have some of the most iconic, and I can't actually believe that I didn't mention this, but the Zidane headbutt. Back, I'm blanking on the year that
yeah, 2006.
2006. Yep, mm-hmm. It was the finale too, and Italy won that year. And I can't. Was it Giorgio Chiellini who got headbutted?
No, it was a player by the name of I forget, Materazzi, I think. He received the headbutt. Chiellini was in the latest Euros, so he wasn't around that time.
Yes.
But Materazzi, I believe, he received the headbutt from Zidane. And for those that are listening, if you don't know Zinedine Zidane, if you're just getting into football, he is an incredibly famous French football player, and he's just a wizard with the ball at his foot. He could be able to, he could score, he can pass, he could get around players. He's just this, I would say the word to describe him would be elegant. He's an elegant footballer. He could glide around players. But Andrew, keep going with the headbutt of 2006.
Oh, yeah. I mean, France, just an amazing team. They won the last World Cup, actually. Really fantastic players. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, they have a lot of injuries coming into this World Cup. So we'll have to see how they perform. But they still have a lot of squad depth. So a really powerful team. And then it's always worth mentioning England. Unfortunately, they have not had the best of luck as of late. They lost the last European Cup, which is a tournament hosted on the continent of Europe amongst all the best European teams. They got to the finale and they lost in penalty kicks, which was really sad to see. A lot of our favorite players that play in the English Premier League specifically were playing in that. Some of them missed penalty kicks at the very end, which was really tough to swallow. But they haven't won since 1966, so their fans are always under the impression one of these days it's going to come home. So we'll see. It might happen this year. I hope not at the expense of the United States, but, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on the topic of teams, let's get into how does a host get selected for the World Cup? Harry, do you want to break that down a little bit?
Yeah. So nowadays, the host country actually gets chosen in a vote. So FIFA is the governing organization around the world for world football. And nowadays, actually, there's a ballot system to choose the country that a World Cup is hosted in. So the World Cup actually gets decided about 7 years in advance. So this is a long time. Think about it, to decide where to host a World Cup. But it's because the host country needs enough time, enough headway to know, okay, what do I need to build? What stadiums do I need to vacate? What do I need to do in order in terms of infrastructure, in terms of logistics, in terms of transportation, in terms of clearing out areas, etc. So it's actually done with a ballot system. So a lot of countries around the world can actually submit their candidacy to host the World Cup. And you can only host the World Cup if you haven't been chosen in the last World Cup. So for the 2018 World Cup bidding process, bids from Africa and South America were not allowed. So actually the two previous World Cups, so 2014 and 2010, it was hosted by, of course, Brazil and South Africa. Those countries and those regions were not allowed to bid again because they were part of the last two World Cup cycles, but any other country from any other region was allowed to bid for their candidacy to host the World Cup. And for those fans getting into the World Cup, why does a country actually want to host the World Cup? It sounds like a lot of logistics, a lot of hassle, a lot of things to work through and to coordinate as a country. But what we have to understand is, first of all, football or soccer is one of the most followed sports around the world. Second of all, it's a sport that a nation actually really gathers together under and really celebrates and really becomes one unit under, even stronger than some political parties or stronger than some organizations that a country tries to represent under. And this is where you really have that clear national pride, maybe not in a negative way, but in a way that represents the country to the best of its ability. And every country, of course, wants to host the World Cup, obviously for tourism, to promote their country, as well as for that incoming revenue. FIFA does give some revenue to these countries that host the World Cup. So for 2018, the bidding process, Africa and South America were not allowed. For 2022, South America and Europe was not allowed because Russia hosted the 2018 one. Brazil hosted the 2014 one. In 2010, I believe it was South America. So for 2022, South America and Europe were not allowed. So for 2018 and 2022, respectively, Russia hosted 2018. 2022 is this year. Of course, if you're listening this year, you will know that the Qatar World Cup is only 2 weeks away from when this podcast is coming out. We're very excited for this. Obviously, a lot of controversy around that, but nevertheless, we're very excited for the World Cup to kick off. But a host gets elected by something called an exhaustive ballot system. So an exhaustive ballot system is as follows. So pretty much every FIFA member, so you get elected to be on the Congress of FIFA. So it's pretty much any nation has representatives. You have Congress in the US, you have Congress in a lot of different nations. To sit on Congress, you get elected as a FIFA member. You can put in one single vote for a country that puts in their bid to be the host nation. The top bids all get accepted. The lowest country that gets voted for automatically gets eliminated, and the next round starts. So round one, the lowest country gets eliminated. Round two, they pretty much keep going until all of the last place countries get eliminated, and then the top country that wins gets to host that year's World Cup. So 2018, Russia was chosen by exhaustive ballot. 2022, Qatar was chosen by exhaustive ballot. Obviously, there is a lot of talk about controversy in terms of, hey, how much money does Russia, Qatar have to sponsor in order for their candidacy to be more noticed by the FIFA Congress? And that's a completely valid statement, thing that you're wondering about. We don't have as much information about that, but if we have any questions from listeners, that's absolutely a topic that we'd love to dive more into in a separate episode, maybe even during the World Cup, Andrew. So that's how a host gets selected for the World Cup. Andrew, let's talk about some past hosts. So let's talk about maybe the past 4 World Cups. What countries hosted these past World Cups, and what can you tell about these countries that have hosted the World Cups ever since 2006, maybe?
Yeah, so past 4 hosts. So 2018, as you alluded to, was Russia. Interestingly enough, and understandably so, Russia will not be participating in this year's World Cup due to the war in Ukraine.
Yep.
FIFA, like many other nation states, have cast the Russian sports teams aside. And we won't get too much into the politics of that, but, understandably, it makes sense. So Russia hosted 2018. Brazil hosted 2014, and that was the World Cup where they got a big drubbing by Germany. 2010 was South Africa, and 2006 was Germany. So it's interesting to note, Harry, you brought it up about infrastructure. So some of these countries do have a lot of infrastructure regarding transportation, hotels. The big thing is stadiums. So places like Germany and Russia have a lot of stadiums. Places like Brazil and South Africa do have stadiums, but they spent a lot of money to build brand new stadiums for the World Cup. And they looked beautiful during the World Cup, some of the most gorgeous stadiums you've ever seen in your life. But unfortunately, after the World Cup, a lot of them stand empty, have been barely used. And this is not just an issue siloed to the World Cup. It's also seen in the Olympics and other big sporting events. And there was a lot of controversy as well from residents of those countries saying, hey, we're having a hard time getting our basic needs met. Why are you spending money on elaborate stadiums when we could use some help? So again, a lot of controversy. I think there's a new documentary out on Netflix actually about FIFA. Might be worth a watch. Obviously, FIFA, like a lot of organizations, is not without its problems and its controversies, but here we're here to focus on the most beautiful game and the football aspect of it. So going off of, how hosts get selected, let's talk a little bit more about how do nations qualify for the World Cup. So FIFA decides the number of places in the finals allocated to each of the world zones. So based on the numbers and the relative strengths of the confederations teams. So I'll explain the confederations here in a second, but it's worth noting, and we talked about this earlier, the host nation always qualifies. So this year, Qatar automatically qualified. Russia, 2018, Brazil, 2014, et cetera, et cetera. So there are qualifying tournaments that each nation must participate in and must advance through in order to get to the World Cup. So to break those down, we've got CONCACAF, which is primarily going to be North America and Central America. So the U.S. is involved in CONCACAF. And we get 3.5 places out of 41 total countries or qualifying, qualifying nations that have teams that can participate. So the half sounds a little bit funky. It is. It basically means that there will be a playoff with another nation group. So this year, that playoff happened with the Oceania Football Confederation. Next up, we have our neighbors to the south, South America. They have CONMEBOL. They have 4.5 places out of 10 participating nations. That half team denotes that there is a playoff with the Asian Federation. Next, we'll move on to UEFA. So UEFA is pretty much all of Europe. Anyone involved in, the 55 countries that are identified as UEFA participants. So they get 13 spots. The CAF refers to Africa. So Africa gets five spots out of 54 places. The AFC is going to be Asia. So Asia gets 4.5 out of 46 places. So that half denotes that they will have one team that goes to a playoff with another team from CONMEBOL, so from South America. And finally, we have the Oceania Confederation, which is understandably very small, a lot of small island nations. So they will only get, out of 11 potential nations, one team will get the chance to qualify through a playoff with a CONCACAF team. So a team from North America or Central America.
Yeah.
So, this all gets underway, almost about 3 years before the actual World Cup. So the build up to the World Cup is not just in the months leading up, the years. It takes years and years of preparation to build teams, get coaches, get coaching staff, recruit, build up tactics. So it is a really long process. And, as an experienced, soccer viewer, soccer fan, I would say that the buildup is sometimes almost as exciting as the actual World Cup. I mean, inevitably the World Cup is more exciting, but the buildup is really exciting. And to see big countries like Italy miss out, we've got Norway missing out this year. Egypt, it's a big deal when these big players in their countries do not make it. So, Harry, let's dive into specifically what awards are given in the World Cup. So, for listeners out there, what are the awards, and can you explain a little bit more about those?
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched upon a really important topic, Andrew. Not every nation qualifies for the World Cup. There's only a specific amount of places that are given to these different confederations around the world. And you'll notice that Andrew talked about a few countries that aren't going: Norway, Egypt, etc. Italy, three fairly strong countries. Italy, especially. Italy has some incredible players. Always historically a very good country that qualifies for the World Cup. They haven't qualified this year. Norway has the phenom. We've talked about him. It's 3 episodes straight. Erling Haaland. He scored again.
The robot.
He scored again today with a penalty. Incredible. And he scored an offside goal against Fulham today. And he's part of Norway, so he's not going to the World Cup. But there are going to be some countries that are going to the World Cup that have phenomenal, incredible players. And there's a few awards that are actually given out at the World Cup for the best performing players, whether you're a striker, whether you're an all-around best player, whether you're the best goalkeeper, best young player, etc. So I'm going to talk about 3 awards. We're actually going to break down more awards in our next pod episode about maybe lesser known awards, but there are 3 awards that are better known among all football fans or soccer fans that watch the World Cup. And these 3 awards I'm going to talk about as follows. One is the Golden Ball, one is the Golden Boot, and one is the Golden Glove. So the Golden Ball is given to the best player at the World Cup. So best player is defined by someone that not just scores goals, so it's not the person that scores the most goals for their team, but the person that helps their team the most, that links up the play, that is the person that inspires their team to go on to wins or draws or to really grind out results against teams and progress against other teams in the World Cup. Usually, I would say historically, it's given to players that make it either to the semifinals, the finals, or go on to win the World Cup. So in 2018, I believe is Croatia versus France in the final. And there's a player called Luka Modric. He's a very, very, just a talented midfielder for this team called Real Madrid, one of the best teams in the world, even today and historically in Spain. And they're out of Madrid, of course, as the name alludes to. And Luka Modric was, I believe he's the captain of Croatia, or he's one of the most important players. And he led them to a final. And I believe that's one of the only finals that Croatia had ever gotten to in the World Cup. So he was a very, very important player. And the FIFA Confederation or the FIFA Congress gave him the Golden Ball Award of the World Cup. So that was back in 2018 for the last Russia World Cup. The Golden Boot actually went to a player that Andrew and I know very well. His name is Harry Kane. Takes after my namesake. I'm just kidding. I take after him, but not really. We both just have the same first name. But Harry Kane is a very well-known English player. So he's from England. He represents the English national team. And in the 2018 World Cup, he scored the most goals. So the Golden Boot goes to the player that scores the most goals across the competition. So I believe he actually scored 6 goals, if I'm not mistaken. I can look this up a little bit later. But he actually scored the most amount of goals across all of the players that played in the competition in 2018 in Russia. So that was Harry Kane for England. And then last but not least, the Golden Glove is the award that goes to the best goalkeeper in the competition. So this is a goalkeeper called Thibaut Courtois. He plays for Belgium, and he's going to play this year as well. So the Belgium national team. Belgium, you might think as a new listener, Belgium seems like a really small nation. They make chocolate. They're in Europe. What else do they do? But they actually have phenomenal players. Thibaut Courtois, one of them. He's an amazing goalkeeper. He also plays for the Real Madrid club team in Spain, but he's also the goalkeeper for Belgium, as well as a few other players. Kevin De Bruyne. We all are familiar with Romelu Lukaku. Andrew and I are at least familiar with him. He played for Manchester United, our team that we support, both of us. But all 3 of these awards obviously are going to go to most likely different people this time around for the World Cup. They historically have not gone to the same player year after year, although I'm sure there are some years that these awards have gone to the same players. Maybe Messi has scored the most goals in subsequent World Cups, but I don't think it's very, very, very likely that these awards will go to the same player every single year. There's quite a bit of a drop-off 4 years between 2018 and 2022. So, Andrew, I'd love to hear your take, and I can give my take as well. Let's get some early predictions under the belt. Next episode, we're going to talk about who we think is going to win the World Cup and who's going to win these awards. But, Andrew, off the top of your head, before we do any research at all, before the next episode, who do you think personally is going to win the Golden Ball, Golden Boot, and Golden Glove? Give me your takes.
My takes. Okay, here we go. These are hot takes. So
Yes.
Best player, Golden Ball, I'm going to give to Kevin De Bruyne.
Ooh.
Player for Manchester City and Belgium. Fantastic midfielder, probably one of the best, if not the best in Europe right now. Absolutely amazing player. Golden Boot, I'm going to go with Kylian Mbappe, player for France and plays for PSG or Paris Saint-Germain. Amazing young talent. Just signed a huge contract with PSG to continue on. Absolutely crushing it right now. It helps that he has Lionel Messi and Neymar as teammates. And Golden Glove, I'm going to go with whoever ends up being the starting keeper for Brazil. So they've got a lot of talents. Either going to be Ederson, who plays for Manchester City, or Alisson, who plays for Liverpool. And it could be a combination of both of them playing. I think whoever gets the most starts for Brazil will get the Golden Glove. Harry, let's hear your takes.
Yes, best player. I'm going to have to give it to Lionel Messi. So a lot of people, for those that don't know Messi, and you may have heard his name mentioned, even if you're not a football or soccer fan, he is one of the best players in the world, arguably the best player of all time, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And this is most likely his last World Cup. So if you think about it as a casual fan or someone that's even really into football, you know that a World Cup comes every 4 years. So this is not every year. It's not like the Super Bowl where you get to play once every single year. This happens only once every 4 years. So if you think about it, if you start as someone, even as a young footballer at the age of 18 or 19, you get how many World Cups, Andrew? You think you get 4 or 5 World Cups, right? So if you start from 18, you go to
if you're
what?
lucky.
Yeah, right? If you're lucky, you get you go to World Cup at 18 at the youngest, I would say. 22, 26, 30, and then 34.
Maybe 34. Yeah.
That's your last World Cup, and that's 5 World Cups, right? You're lucky if you even go to 5 World Cups in the lifetime that you play as a footballer. So for Messi, he started very young as a player, part of Barcelona, as a Spanish football team. And he's one of the best players of all time, and this is most likely his last World Cup. So I'm going to give the golden ball to Messi. He's just going to play his heart out. The passion's going to be on the field. He's going to represent Argentina. He just won the was it the Copa America against Brazil?
He did.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So that was I believe it the South American Cup for the South American teams, and Argentina beat Brazil in the final, and he's going to be looking to continue his run of representing his nation on the world stage for the World Cup, and he's going to play his heart out. So best player, Golden Ball, Lionel Messi. Golden Boot, I'm actually going to agree with you, Andrew. I think it's going to be Kylian Mbappe. He's been in an amazing form for the French team PSG. Kylian Mbappe, for those of you that don't know, plays for the French national team. He also plays on a French team, French club called Paris Saint-Germain. It's a French club in Paris, based out of Paris. And he is one of the hottest, one of the most frighteningly talented young prospects. Not even a prospect, he's just a full-blown, incredible player. I believe he's in his early 20s, and a lot of teams want him, most notably Real Madrid. And he's just an insane goal scorer. He can make a goal out of nothing. So I'm going to give him the Golden Boot, although France, we're going to cover this in our next podcast, has a lot of injuries actually at the moment. So when your team has a lot of injuries, it's hard to actually get the ball up to your forwards to score. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but Golden Boot's going to go to Kylian Mbappe. And Golden Glove, I'm actually going to give it to Emilio Martinez. So he is a keeper that plays for a team in the English Premier League called Aston Villa, but he also plays for the Argentinian national team, same team as Lionel Messi, and he is just insane. And he's insane in every meaning of the word. He's not just insanely talented, but when, as an opponent, if you come up against Martinez as a goalkeeper, he will frighten you. He will make you crap your pants. He's that scary. And he's just a wild man, and he saves everything. He's got this passion for his nation. So I'm going to give it to him because Messi's going to spur him on. The whole national team's going to spur him on. He's just a madman. So I'm going to give it to Martinez. And those are the 3 awards in the World Cup. I mean, Andrew, how excited are you? Are you excited? We've only got 2 weeks left until the World Cup kicks off. What nations are you most looking forward to watching? Give me 3 nations that you can't wait to follow along and see if they'll make it far in the competition.
I can't wait. I'm absolutely ecstatic. I am first and foremost excited to watch the U.S. men's team.
Yep.
Prepared for heartbreak, but cautiously optimistic. We'll see what we can do, what Greg Berhalter and the boys can accomplish. Very excited to watch. I would have to say Brazil and Argentina. Yeah. I really think both have a good shot at winning the whole thing, and I cannot wait to see just those stacked squads just face off against other nations. I think it's going to be a really, really great World Cup. How about for you? Who are you looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, first and foremost, I would say Argentina. Argentina, because of Messi, he just has a huge legacy, and winning a World Cup would be not just the icing on the cake, but would make up his legacy, the foundation of his legacy. He's won everything with Barcelona, which is the club team that he grew up with, and he's won a very major tournament with Argentina, but he just needs to take it home with this World Cup. Obviously, the U.S., ethnically, I'm Chinese, but I was born in the United States, so I will always 100% every single time root for the USA men's national team. So I'm very excited. We've got a lot of, I would say, so I've been reading a lot on the US men's national team for football, and we have, I would say, a golden generation for this generation that's going to the World Cup. It might not be the most cohesive team that's going to the World Cup, but it is the most talented. We've got Pulisic, we've got Weston McKennie, we've got a lot of other players. What, Tim Weah? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Coming to the World Cup.
Yeah.
There's a few other players. Gio Reyna, right? And he's supposed to be one of the best up-and-coming defensive midfielders around, just in Europe, in America, around the world. So a lot of really good players for the U.S. And if you're just getting into football and you are American, the U.S. has a lot of players. Usually we're actually known as, I wouldn't say the laughing stock, but we're known as a nation that is very, very, underrepresented in the World Cup. Let's just say that. And our talent has not been good. But over the last 6 to 8 years, we've been producing some incredible players. So we can keep the trend up. And then lastly, I would always say and I talked a little bit about this early on in the podcast, but I've always got a soft spot for Spain. And a lot of Spanish players are young. There's a huge gap between the older Spanish players and the younger Spanish players. And I'd love to see Spain go at least midway through the World Cup. I don't think they're going to go to the final, but I've always got a soft spot for them watching La Liga, which is the Spanish league, top tier league growing up. And I love their players. So Spain is one to watch out for as well. But Andrew, what are your closing thoughts about the World Cup? What are you excited for most off? What are you maybe not excited for? And what are some tips that you tell our viewers or our listeners to watch out for when tuning in for their first ever World Cup match?
Oh, probably not excited for early games. I don't know quite the time difference between us and Qatar. I think it's 12 or 13 hours. So I think the games will be at weird times, especially on weekdays. But I will also say that adds kind of a fun quirk to it. Get together with your friends, check out to see if there's public viewings in your area, whether it be at pubs or, sometimes in big town squares. They have projectors set up. It's just a really fun time to unify with your fellow countrymen, countrywomen. And I think it's a fun time to bond. I think the world is just looking for, reasons to celebrate, reasons to have friendly competition. I think we always see a lot of unity with things like the Olympics and the World Cup. So I'm really excited for that. As far as what to look for, I think just try to catch any game you can. Try to, if you can't pick teams that you're really interested in, just try to catch, part of a game, full game. Definitely try to tune into the U.S. If you can. It's a lot of fun watching your team compete on the big stage. And look out for some of those big players that we mentioned, the Messis, the Mbappes, the Kevin De Bruynes. They all play for wonderful teams, and I think we'll have a lot of great competition. And I'm buzzing. I can't wait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here, Andrew. I would say definitely what to look out for is if you have a nation that you represent or identify with. So if you're English, if you're American, if you're Iranian, if you are Welsh, I just named that whole group right there. But if you identify with any nation that's going to be represented at the World Cup, that's just an easy in for you to root for the national team. So research or take a look at what players are going to the World Cup, what the predicted starting 11, and there's usually 11 players out in the field versus the other 11, and what the strongest 11 players are going to be for that team, and definitely take a look at who to look out for, what are the most exciting players for each team, and catch the games that the team that you identify with are going to be playing. I would say take a look at some other teams as well. We talked about in episode 1 actually, or episode 2, pod 2, of how you pick a football club to follow, of watching out for individual players and coaches. So individual players will be absolutely playing their hearts out at the World Cup. And actually, this is how a lot of players get scouted. So at the World Cup, as a player, not all the players that represent their countries come from big clubs. So you have big clubs like Real Madrid, Barcelona. You've got Manchester United. I'm always going to put them above Manchester City, no matter how badly United are doing. But Manchester United, Chelsea, you've got Liverpool, City. You've got all the big clubs. Dare I even say Tottenham in the Premier League. But not all players are going to come from big clubs that are representing the country. They might come from second-tier clubs or clubs that are not at the top of the places in the league that they're in. And when they play for their countries, maybe for countries that are not expected to go as far in the World Cup, they can shine and they can show scouts, hey, I'm here, look at me, recruit me for the big team. So when you're looking at games, don't just follow your country necessarily, but actually catch as many matches, like Andrew said, as possible, and then look at those players that really excite you and make you feel like they are playing with electricity and they pass quickly and they have flair and they get into the box and they make passes and that make you feel like, yeah, I want to watch further. So definitely watch out for players. Things that I say that are not going to be as exciting. Obviously, Qatar, like Andrew said, there's going to be a time difference. It's actually 11 hours from the West Coast here in California.
Okay, 11. Good to know. Yeah.
Andrew and I are here in the Bay Area in California. It's not as bad if you're on the East Coast in the US. Obviously, not as bad even if you're in the UK or Europe, etc. But I would say in Qatar, it is known to be blazing hot in this time of year. And the reason that they're doing it in November, December is because if they did it in the summer, it would be in the low 100s all day around. And the only way they can play football at all in Qatar, and this is one of the reasons why it didn't make any sense for it to be in Qatar in the first place, but they actually had to install AC units all around the stadium, even around the pitch of the football field, to be able to make the conditions manageable enough for the players to actually play football. So not looking forward to the time difference, not looking forward to seeing the players have to really suffer out there. And then again, just the whole ethical conundrum of having in Qatar. I'm not looking forward to the conversations of people going and promoting the Qatar World Cup and then seemingly disregarding all of the things that have taken place there. Obviously, a lot of things. If you're not familiar with the Qatar, they are not very, I would say, human friendly in terms of treating people fairly in the workplace and the work that they give and conditions and workers that have built stadiums and things like that. And we can certainly get into that a little bit later. But I would say there's a lot of positives to take away from the World Cup in terms of the nations that are going and the competition that's going. So I'm very excited for that. And Andrew and I are going to be previewing who we think is going to be winning the World Cup in the next episode, as well as who's going to play second, third, who's going to take away the top awards, who we are excited for as players, as individuals, and who's not going to the World Cup, even if their country's qualified in the next episode. So that was today's episode of the Super Subs, where we talked about what the World Cup is with
Andrew
and Harry. Tune in next time for our preview of the World Cup and our predictions of who's going to place first, second, and third. And we're excited for you to tune in next time. Catch you all on the Super Subs next time.